Good morning and welcome to this workshop on boosting intercontinental trade. Esther Huerta speaking. I will be your moderator during this event. I am working for AfrIPI. AfrIPI is a project that is promoting intellectual property rights in Africa. AfrIPI is co-funded by the European Commission and by the EUIPO. The EUIPO is the European agency that deals with intellectual property rights. A few words on how this event will be organized. It will be divided in two parts with two wonderful speakers that we have. We have on the one hand Mr. Sant Makbalu, and on the other hand Mr. Simba Makamatse. So the second part will be purely dedicated to questions and answers. So we want really this event to be interactive, and we really would like to push you to start already posting your questions in the chat, and we'll be very happy to answer to all of them in the second part of the event. So without delay, I would like to introduce you to our first speaker, who is Mr. Sant Makbalu. He's an international trade and investment expert for the African market with over 15 years of professional experience, working in a complex multicultural environment in international trade and investment. Sant is the current Executive Director of Africa International Trade and Commerce Research, among many other active roles that he has in the trade sector. He's very much passionate about trade and comes today to speak about IP as a tool to boost African trade. So, Mr. Sant, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Esther, for that excellent remark. That was so kind of you. So I consider this as an honor to be part of the EU African Business Forum and making a presentation today. I'll be sharing my slide, and after the slide, as Esther has rightly pointed out, we'll go into the Q&A session. And I must also welcome my friend and my brother, Simba, and that was to be part of our session, and Binta, our colleague from Europe. So, if with the permission of the technical team, may I go ahead and share my slide now? Okay. All right. So. Excellent. As Esther has rightly pointed out, I will be speaking on intellectual property as a tool to boost African trade. Basically, trade itself is like everything for people like us. We consider trade to be everything, and because without trade there will be no development. Without trade there will be no job. Without trade, there'll be no empowerment of the people. So, but however, by introduction, this issue of trade and IP has been ongoing. The intellectual property, the agreement on trade-related aspect of intellectual property rights under the WTO establishes that a universal legal binding set. It establishes a universal legal binding set as a substantive minimum IP standard. That is the TRIPS agreement for its members to provide enabling environment for members to interact. Article 7 of the TRIPS agreement provides that the protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights should contribute to the promotion of technology, innovation, and the transfer and dissemination of technology to a mutual advantage of producers and users of technology knowledge, and in a manner that is conducive for social and economic welfare. Basically, what this is talking about is that the shoe in that word implies that there is a guarantee that IP promotes innovation and economic growth. There has been a mixed reaction, of course, whereby within the experts community, the negotiators and the actors, that the role of IP in all this. And we are talking in the context of Africa. bearing in mind that Africa, as it were, has 54 countries, and 2 is considered high income countries, 6 is considered upper middle income countries, and 23 is considered as low middle income countries. The remaining 23 is low income countries based on World Bank standard. Basically, the brief is that IP protection can boost inter and intracontinental trade, which specifically underscores that intellectual property rights will stimulate innovation by enabling inventors to appropriately get investment from their return. But this has not always been the case, because over the years, this contention between IP experts, the users, and as well as the advocates on where do we place IP. Some experts have advocated a universal strong intellectual property regime for international trade. Others have advocated that there should be a balanced approach on IP development between developing and developed countries. At the same time, some experts had advocated a flexible and exceptional approach for domestic trade, especially for Africa. This has led to a situation whereby, if you consider IP in a country, in a continent like Africa, where 2 are high income countries, about 23 countries are low income countries, the issue of cross-border trade becomes an issue in order to enforce IP. For example, when we talk about intellectual property, we're talking about copyrights, we're talking about patents, we're talking about industrial design, we're talking about geographical indications. That has a consequence of, if you don't enforce properly, it leads to abuse. But how do you enforce a diverse area of intellectual property in a country that is technically fragmented by income and economic welfare? So within the African context, we then have the AfrIPI, we have the AfrIPI. Okay, AfrIPI organizes and facilitates intellectual property with a decentralized system. AfrIPI operates a centralized system. That means that Africa, as we see it today, has a number of issues, has a number of challenges, but IP must progress. We must move on with IP in Africa. So this belief that IP, a strong IP protection, can boost intra-African trade is also brought to questions because of when you look at the dynamism of Africa. This argument is that what happened in developed country might not necessarily happen in developing country like Africa. However, intellectual property have been evolving when it comes to Africa. So, which we all know, the landscape is changing, globalization is changing, the fragmentation of the production value chain is also changing. Because currently, with COVID-19, we realize that how we administer and enforce IP has to change, and it is really changing. Even while intellectual property role is redefining things and it changing international trade landscape, the whole idea is to use IP to optimize even the changes that we are currently experiencing. So with this evolving and transformation that we are seeing, we can see that play out in the vaccine production of late. What is the role of IP? And it plays a critical role. What is the role of international trade? It plays a critical role. So harmonizing these two areas is basically what we are trying to bring forward today. In the context of Africa, IP itself is still in a very is in a starting point, and that is why, as I progress in my presentation, you see why we have to rethink our position as Africans. I say as African because I'm one. The international community also wants to think the way they engage Africa when it comes to IP. So my next presentation will be what is developing in IP in Africa. Of course, research has shown that the largest economy are largely driven by IP. While developing countries can use IP to promote economic development, integration, and encourage FDIs. Not just FDI, but even diaspora funds. But African experience in this area is totally different. Over the years, has Africa really benefited from IP development to attract FDI? I would say yes, and I also say no, because the yes aspect is not big enough. There is some fragmentation. There are some benefit that Africa has accrued from opening up IP, especially IP has supported some FDIs, but it has not, to a large extent, been what we expect. But therefore, a regulatory environment that supports and have a blueprint for a continuous development of IP, focus on industry, tend to increase international trade activities. Of course, a country, a continent, an area, a business area that is predictable encourage foreign direct investment. But whereby it is not predictable, it discourages, and investors are wary of putting in an investment. And that's not just the foreign direct, when I talk about foreign direct investment, I'm not just talking about foreign direct investment from Europe, I'm talking about even the diaspora funds coming to Africa. There is this concern that if I invest my money, will it be protected? If I invest in the research and development, what will happen when someone infringed on that right? So, but we have an opportunity now as Africa. The protection of intellectual property rights will remain key if we want to implement the AfCFTA. AfCFTA, that is African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. It is an agreement that African Union proposed and which currently is now in force with about 40 African countries signing up to it. If we don't have an IP system that guarantee the investment or the opportunity for one to trade with one another, we might not be able to achieve the aspiration of AfCFTA. Because AfCFTA itself will serve as a catalyst for post-pandemic recovery of Africa. The AfCFTA is a vehicle for realizing the Pan-African dream of vision for regional economic integration and social transformation. And I submit at this point that intellectual property is going to play a key role in this aspect. But we have a chance to make intellectual property play a key role, because the second phase 2 negotiation on AfCFTA is about to commence, or it has not even commenced, that considers intellectual property. Because phase 2 protocol on AfCFTA covers investment, competition policy, intellectual property, digital trade, and now they've included women in trade, which is critical to accelerate international trade development in Africa. And it also has the ability for Africa to trade more with each other. As I've pointed out earlier on, as at January 29, 2022, we have about 40 African countries that have signed up, ratified, and adopted their instruments of ratification with the African Union, sign up to AfCFTA. That means we have an opportunity to be able to deal with every impediment, everything that has hindered Africa from utilizing and maximizing the opportunity therein in intellectual property. It is pertinent that we address this, because if we don't address the issue of intellectual property, we'll still we'll still struggle with ensuring that AfCFTA benefit Africa, that Africa trades more with each other. We have to mainstream intellectual property in trade in Africa. What do I mean by that? Because if we don't mainstream intellectual property in trade in Africa, it will be an issue. Because when we mainstream intellectual property in trade in Africa, it provides an impetus and a vigor for economic integration in Africa, and it will boost inter-African trade, and as well as improve export diversification. But with all what I've said, with all the benefits, there are impediments which I believe we can address. And those impediments are, one, several African countries, with the exception of few, like in South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, and Rwanda, have an IP enforcement system that addresses some of the loophole of bureaucratic bottleneck, lack of technology, ability, public awareness. Most African countries, especially the people that consume IP, or even the people that are supposed to own IP, don't understand what IP is about. So these are impediments to IP, intellectual property system in Africa. So what we are talking about now is that this major impediment can be dealt with. The second one is that policymakers and economists, even while they are well versed in boosting global trade, majority of them, so there's no agreement, there's no central agreement in ensuring that IP works for everyone. So there is a misunderstanding in the area of, do we have a strong IP system? Do you have a balanced IP system? Do you have a flexible IP system? That agreement, that understanding is still an issue when it comes to Africa. It plays out seriously when you consider IP implementation in Africa. And that is an impediment and a stumbling block to IP working with trade and boosting economic development. The other aspect is also the high cost of filing. Some people will dispute with me that IP is not that too expensive to file in Africa, but we have a case. To raise an idea in Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, Senegal, is far expensive. It's higher than to raise an idea in Canada, in UK, in Japan. This creates avoidable barrier. Just with this, we don't have a good number registering intellectual property in Africa. Why even make it expensive? Why put a cost to it? Why make it difficult for entrepreneurs to benefit from it? So if we reduce the cost, if we take away the cost, this might accelerate and support registration of IP in Africa, and more people will benefit from it, and by extension will help to ease and develop the economy. The other aspect is the fragmentation of systems in Africa. We have the OAPI, we have the AfrIPI. I've pointed out earlier on. These are issues whereby most African countries' intellectual property policies are not in line with the one from the regional protocols. So there is this disconnect from what happens in national interests and regional interests vis-a-vis continental and global interests. So we are protecting our territories. We are protecting our territories from trade, from IP and everything. But this is hurting us and hurting everyone, because with this fragmentation, and last 2 years or so, we hosted a webinar series with the OAPI on AfrIPI, and there was this discussion of harmonizing the system across board. But the fundamental is still there. This issue of discussing and harmonizing is taking too long. Absolutely, it's taking too long. And that too long that is taking, that time is taking, is hurting businesses, is causing great underdevelopment, is causing poverty, is causing the spread of costing us revenues across Africa. Beyond that, is stifling investment and as well as creativity across borders. These are issues that we have to deal with. However, what is the current status of IP in Africa? So, globally, intellectual property represents the main component of many cross-border trade. Outside the extractive industry, maybe the raw material. everything we export, we consider in trade, has an intellectual property component to it, be it the trademark, be it the brand name, be it the product, trade secret. It has a component. However, if you look at as at 2024, as 2014, cross-border export shows that the trade was 4 trillion naira, $4 trillion, so, I beg your pardon, and $1.6 trillion was commercial knowledge intensive services, while $2.4 trillion was export of high tech products. That means that the world is evolving and Africa has to play a key role to key into it. Without Africa playing a key role to key into this and creating an enabling environment for IP to thrive, we might lose out of this. And I'll show you why. Because the next slide, I'm going to show you why IP innovation, the progress report on IP. $2.4 trillion is huge. That means for IP to benefit Africans, Africa has to benefit from this $2.4 trillion market. If we don't benefit from it, if we don't create an enabling environment for, we're not going to benefit from it. The status now is this. I understand there is a lot of reform going on, and I'm going to still emphasize the benefit, the opportunity we have under AfCFTA, under the next phase negotiation. Our negotiation should focus on how do we make IP an instrument to develop, not an IP, an instrument to develop our nation at the detriment of the region and the continent. So this is an opportunity, and this is an opportunity also for international community to support Africa to be able to ensure we key into this. We key into IP and creating the enabling environment, and I commend EU for that which they are doing so far under the AfrIPI project, supporting IP to create an enabling environment to be able to benefit from, supporting Africa to create an enabling environment to benefit from IP. So this is the progress. Currently, while Africa trades with the world globally increased, but it's still consistently below 3% of import and export. What that implies is that we're not trading value, intellectual property driven product with the global community. And this is also the issue with us trading with ourselves. So Africa is more of an import driven continent. We don't export because most of our exports are primary, value are not added. When a value is added to a product, intellectual property play a key role to that. If we create an enabling environment for intellectual property in Africa, we will change this narrative of 3% contribution to international import and export globally. We will change the narrative of 17% trading with ourselves. And if you look at as of 2018, African service sector accounted for 52% of African GDP, largely boosted by the booming digital sector. And when I talk about digital sector, who are the dominant players in digital sector? It's the young people. Young people are not destructive. They are creative people. They have ideas. They are energetic. They have strength. They have knowledge. But if there is no enabling environment for them to key into, the reverse is what we'll get. And that is what we are currently experiencing. The insecurity, the crime, is because IP, we've not mainstream IP. As soon as we mainstream IP, we see this will change. Because of time, I have to move fast now. So the next, the creation, the IP and innovation progress in Africa, we can see where young people are playing and what they are doing. Organizations that are less than 10 years old are attracting over $1 billion investment into Africa, the unicorns of Africa. Currently, we have about 7 unicorns in Africa. 5 of them are digitally driven and they are in the fintech industry. So that means if we create an IP system that is balanced, I'm not advocating for a strong one. I'm creating for why we have to use the progressive methodology to be able to address our challenges. We can't make IP too flexible so that we support the local industry. It's not going to work, but we must balance. We must adhere to international protocol. At the same time, we must also ensure we formalize our informal sector to be able to key into it. Over $1 billion in less than 10 years businesses attracted into the country. 5 of them are fintech, and fintech are highly driven by IP. It's intellectual property that most investors invest in because it guarantees them the return on investments. So we can replicate this in other industries. We can replicate this in agriculture. We can replicate this because geographical indication gives us that opportunity to replicate this in those areas because geography is a component of intellectual property. So potentials of intellectual property in Africa. A balanced system will support innovation and boost export diversification across Africa, with no exception. Because when we have a balanced system, we're not having a system whereby we are looking down on the less developed countries or landlocked countries. We are creating a system where we accommodate the Ubuntu of Africa. Africa is known to take care of its brothers. So economically, when we put IP system, we must be able to have a system whereby we take care of the less and the landlocked countries and the high income countries at the same time. So IP will help us. I can't even go into the IP and Agenda 2060, which is creating a system, an aspiration of creating the Africa we want. IP will play a key role in all the 7 aspirations of Agenda 2063. IP is going to play a key role in foreign direct investment. IP will play a key role in preserving our heritage through geographical indications. IP, of course, will also play a very key role in protecting consumers in healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry. You agree with me that the pharmaceutical industry is key to the post-COVID-19 recovery of Africa. But currently, we are not producing any vaccine. We are still in discussion to be allowed to produce. Why is this so? Because we have not, over the years, created that enabling environment or those institutions to be able to support this growth. Ladies and gentlemen, for us to be successful, again, under AfCFTA, our IP negotiation has to be addressed and has to be key. It's key in the form that the system, the terminology we use in negotiating the IP protocol has to align with our current reality. So going forward, the way forward is for Africa to realize its full potential in a multilateral trading system, it will have to put in place policies that encourage and protect innovation, both for residents and non-residents alike. What I mean is this: both the IP system has to protect Africans and non-Africans. An investor cannot come into a right holder cannot have an IP registered overseas and come to Africa and is abused. A system must be in place to be able to address it and punish the violators. Currently, what you have now is that because of the fragmentation we have, it is not helping the genuine entrepreneurs to catch up with the international community. What it's doing is to help fund criminal enterprise that steal other people's idea, mass produce the products in Africa, not just Nigeria, be it designer wares, and fund a criminal enterprise. But if we want IP to address these issues of crime, we must put an IP that is balanced. We must address and arrest those that infringe on other people's rights. Bring them to book in a transparent manner and allow the law to take its course. By so doing, it will encourage more people to invest their funds and register the IP system in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, we should go beyond paper policy in Africa. We should move to the practicality of when we talk about policies. Because if we don't do that, we might continue in the next 10 years and it will be to the detriment of our economic development. I'm advocating at this point that a balanced approach is the best solution to boost African trade. a balanced approach of intellectual property rights. There are reforms going on, but those reforms must also capture the informal sector in Africa, because currently 25% of Benin Republic GDP is informal trade with Nigeria. And these are intellectual property or rights moving from one border to the other. So this system I'm advocating, which is a balanced approach, it will accommodate the informal sector, while as well as encouraging them to formalize that system. Ideas are moving around Africa, but it's not being captured. And that is why when you look at the global international index on intellectual property, Africa is still below the mark. Because the ideas change, the innovation, the creativity going on in Africa are not being captured by the current methodology or indices used in measuring intellectual property. So in conclusion, I will quote WIPO. IP, intellectual property protocol, can serve as a catalyst for technology transfer, technology diffusion, and economic transformation of Africa economies, from one that is primary resource-based to one that is driven by knowledge, information, and ideas. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Sand, for this very interesting presentation on the impact of intellectual property on trade, which is actually huge, we can see. Now is the time for interaction. And of course, you can still ask questions to Mr. Sand, but in addition to that, we have the privilege to count today as well with another very good speaker, which is Mr. Simba Makamatse. He's expert on intellectual property and willing to answer to all your questions on intellectual property. Mr. Simba is an intellectual property law expert with more than 12 years experience covering Africa and the Middle East. He's the founder and CEO of All Things IP Africa, an African IP lawyers platform that is focused on helping global clients protect and manage their IP across the African continent. So basically, you can see the expertise of Mr. Simba, and now is the opportunity for you to actually ask questions. If you're an SME that is planning to go to Africa, if you're an SME that is African and willing to ask questions about intellectual property, this is your time. For the moment, I'm checking the chat and I see that we have no questions. So maybe I can start with one, Mr. Simba. If I'm an SME in Europe that is planning to go to Africa, which are my challenges in terms of intellectual property? Can you actually share some challenges, some solutions that come to your mind?
Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you, everyone. And many thanks to my brother Sent for the presentation and, of course, setting the foundation. I think Sent touched on some of the challenges that then, as an SME or as a business that intends to venture into Africa, should look into. The first one, which is the key one, is the issue of fragmentation. Africa as a continent has got 54 countries. We've got 2 regional bodies, that is AfrIPI with 21 member states. That's a complementary system. Then we've got OAPI, which is also mentioned, which is a unitary system that covers 17 countries. Now, as an SME that is coming into Africa, there is a huge difference between the European unitary approach, where with one application you can then be able to cover all the 27 countries. That's not possible in Africa. So the key driver to an appropriate strategy to the continent would then be having reliable, experienced, and professional IP attorneys who are resident, who are on the ground, so that your strategy will actually be guided by resident expertise. So in this case, for Africa, for example, with OAPI, one application will be able to cover 17 African countries for you. Then we have AfrIPI, which uses a designation system. So in terms of trademarks, you'll be able to cover 12 countries. That's about 29 out of 54 countries. So technically, you then require to file direct applications in each and every jurisdiction, depending on your business strategy and your market strategy. And then the other tip or the other option will also be to consider the international route, which is the Madrid system. But again, the Madrid system in terms of coverage, it doesn't cover the whole continent. We are looking at 37 or possibly 38 countries that will be covered. So again, to answer your question, the key issue is to have expert guidance from resident IP experts.
Perfect. And we have with us Beata Suwala, who works for the IP SME Help Desk in Africa. So actually, maybe Beata, you want to add on something to what Simba said?
Thank you very much, Esther. Good morning, everyone. Hope you are having a very nice time with us. It's our first workshop, so I hope it's going well, you enjoy. As exactly what Simba was saying and what Sand, I would like to add from my side that I am the coordinator of the Africa IP SME Help Desk, which is a relatively new project. It is funded by the European Commission, and our aim is to actually assist European small and medium-sized enterprises when when thinking about investing in Africa. So for this purpose, we have been working very hard to collect as much information as possible about investing in African countries. Of course, this is a big challenge on us. We are trying to get information about exactly 55 African countries and to interpret this and to disseminate freely with the SMEs. So our purpose is here to freely to get information and to disseminate with the SMEs in terms of intellectual property, market access in African countries. So exactly as Simba mentioned, the strategy for Africa is a key, and it is not very possible to apply this strategy itself without knowing the markets, without entering Africa. And here the lawyers are the key. We have 54 countries in Africa, 2 regional organizations, a number of languages, a number of cultures that the typical EU SME have to face. And we, from the Africa IPR SME Help Desk, will be trying to help to assist these SMEs before entering Africa. We can here I would like to welcome all the European SMEs for free of charge advice at our service, and our advice also. It's not really legal advice. We cannot apply a particular strategy for a particular SME, but we can guide you. With our intelligence, with our network of lawyers, we will be able to draw the attention of the small, medium-sized enterprises about the particularities of each system. You know, when the company goes to one Africa country, maybe the trademark that they use in Europe, maybe it will have to be translated to the local language. Maybe the visual aspects of trademarks will be more important. When applying the innovative solutions, the things that have to be taken into consideration when transferring your technology to African countries, is the protection sufficient in particular member states? Are you at risk of losing your innovation when entering Africa? This all has to be, first of all, researched and checked with the lawyers. Hence, I invite all the SMEs to our services to consult with us, to participate in our webinars and in our training events. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Beata, for this very interesting information that you just added. I see that we have 5 minutes left. I don't see any particular question. I see that many of our attendees, some of our attendees are actually sending us some interesting information to contact. I really invite you to actually contact us, because maybe you don't have a question right now, but the question may come in the afternoon or tomorrow or next week or next month. So during this week, you can always contact us through the booth. We have a booth in the business forum, or you can contact us as well through the AfrIPI generic email, and we'll be very happy to answer to any question. But taking advantage of these 5 minutes, I would like actually to ask maybe a last question to our speakers, taking advantage of their presence here, to Mr. Simba and to Mr. Sand. We have spoken about European SMEs planning to go to Africa. Now, if I'm an African SME, and I want to know more about intellectual property. I want to know more about my challenges. Could you guide us a little bit on that, Mr. Simba or Mr. Sand?
Thank you so much, Esther. I'll share my input, and of course, Mr. Sand can also throw in ideas. I think the most important issue from an African SME point of view is, besides access to knowledge, the issue of cost, which is again one of the impediments that Mr. Sand mentioned. The costs associated with the protection of IP in Africa are some of the impediments that we then see. But however, like the issue that Mr. Sand has mentioned in terms of losing ideas or getting some business lost, there are other internal measures that can be used in terms of protecting IP as an SME. And a very good example is the loss of, the internal risk, especially for startups, splitting of founders, and IP moves with the living individual. So issues like that would then need to be addressed by measures like non-disclosure agreements. Then, of course, always making sure that you engage an expert, a lawyer within your jurisdiction. That's also another measure. In terms of enforcement, it's again a challenge that has been raised. But however, I normally prefer looking at the positive side of things, and of course the measures that can be put in place to make sure that the IP is enforced within the continent. Over to you, Sand.
Okay, so thank you very much, Esther, and thank you, Simba, for that intervention. So when we talked when I made my presentation, I did mention, and which of course Simba has also collaborated, that Africa has 2 IP systems, has 2 intergovernmental organizations that governs IP, the AfrIPI and the AfrIPI. So as an SME that wants to register maybe a trademark outside their jurisdiction, what they should ask for, say, are they members of AfrIPI or AfrIPI? As in, I think that will help. So where am I registering? So for example, a Cameroon SME that wants to register his trade or her trademark in say Benin Republic. Benin Republic is a French-speaking country. So is Benin Republic a member of AfrIPI? So if you have that understanding, that is clear. So that means you can file your application not leaving Cameroon, but file it in Cameroon. So and it will go through to other it will reflect in Benin Republic. So, but if you are from say Gambia, and you want to file your application in Ghana, so you have to find out, is Gambia a member of AfrIPI? Okay, so the two intergovernmental regional organizations that facilitate and that govern IP in Africa are mostly driven first by technically the colonial line. So most French-speaking countries are AfrIPI, and most English-speaking countries are AfrIPI. So that is something that they are still trying to address. So because they operate a centralized system, AfrIPI, based on the French style or their style, So AfrIPI facilitates a decentralized system. However, it will be recognized, but you have to go to that country, even if it's going to be expensive to file. So you need to rely back on, I'm referring you back now to a lawyer. Yes, these lawyers are expensive. So that's why I will be advocating that maybe some incentive should be put in place by government to support these SMEs, because and that is part of the creating enabling environment. By creating enabling environment, you create some incentive for African IP entrepreneurs to be able to benefit from IP systems. It's better to benefit because it becomes an asset of the organization. So I will encourage more businesses to sign up to it. So consider the two interregional organizations and see where your country is. Nigeria is not a member of any of these organizations. Neither is South Africa. So that is why it's always expensive for South African or Nigerian business to go into those countries and register. And that's why if you consider the cost, you just relax and just say, I don't care. So that limits business potential, opportunity to business ability to grow. That cuts income. That deprives people of opportunity to create jobs. Because when you create job, when your IP goes abroad, you create job and it brings in foreign exchange. I hope our government and the policymakers will think about this and reconsider putting those measures in place. Again, we have an opportunity now under AFCA, and I believe we'll get it right, especially with men and women like Simba supporting the system. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Sant. Thanks a lot, Simba, and thanks to everyone for attending this workshop. Once again, you're really invited to visit our booth in AfrIPI, and you're really invited to actually get some conversation with us. We are very happy to meet you bilaterally as well. Or please contact us. We have posted in the chat our generic email. We are very invited as well to attend our next workshop that is taking place on Friday morning on intellectual property and SME competitiveness, the importance of intellectual property with that. So thanks a lot again and have a very nice day.